Okay then. Thank you very much for everybody to join. I'm Wojtek Boniaszczuk, a regional head in the agribusiness team. Welcome everyone to our first and hopefully long series of EBRD Agribusiness webinars. We hope to provide answers to a number of important topics which affect the sector today by bringing to you experts, practitioners, and entrepreneurs and asking them the right questions. We hope to create a library of these events, and the webinars will be, and therefore the webinar will be recorded and made available later on our website. Today's webinar is focused on data-driven efficiency and sustainability in precision agriculture. In terms of agenda, the webinar is expected to last somewhere between an hour, hour and a half. I will set out the scene with a brief introduction of the topic, which will be followed by a deep dive into the world of precision farming. The presentation will be followed by a panel discussion with our experts, then a Q&A session, and I will close the event with a few final remarks. To test your knowledge of precision farming, we will have a few polling questions along the way, which we hope you will answer. The questions will appear in the right side of your screen. You will have a minute or so to answer them, and then we'll provide you answers throughout the webinar. Regrettably, due to our budget constraints, there will be no prizes. If you have questions to our experts, please send them to us in writing and we on the screen, and we will collate them and ask them at the appropriate speaker during the Q&A session. Throughout the webinar, I will be assisted by Nimo Virgic and Vasil Hovera, who are the brains behind this event. Nimo will run the polling, and Vasil will help us at the end with the Q&A session. And also, he will be the one moving the slides around. Now that we are done with the admin part, let's move to the substance of this webinar, as we have a lot of ground to cover. Before we go into the intro, we perhaps will start with the first polling question, and Nimo will present that.
Yes, thank you, Wojtek. So just in the beginning to start try out this functionality, a little bit of a quiz. So I'll open the poll now. And I hope you can now see it in your right hand corner. Just again, a bit of a quiz to test your knowledge. So what is the highest resolution of satellite images currently available for agriculture? And the possible answers are 3 by 3 meters, 1 by 1 meter, 30 by 30 centimeters, or 15 by 15 centimeters. So please give your answers, both audience and panelists, and the polling question will close in 2 minutes. So you'll see it. You'll see the answers here as well. Thank you, Wojtek. Back to you.
Thanks very much, Nimo. We will provide answers, I think, after my presentation, so please do make your choices. Vasil, should we start with my slides? There are only very few of them, as I'm not one of the experts. Let's move to the following slide. This slide shows the growth of yield per hectare of cereals in the UK. In many ways, this has reflected the focus of agriculture for many centuries, how to get as much output out of a hectare of land. This slide also shows the progress made to date. Until recently, there was not even a question what was the impact on the world at large of this constant drive to maximize output. Not many bothered whether it was sustainable, what was it doing to the soil, the larger environment, climate, or wildlife. Next slide, please. For centuries, since the agricultural revolution, the world was interested in surviving the winter, having enough grain and meat to last until spring, and send some of the excess to those who don't grow their own. Until the early 20th century, the technology remained relatively unchanged. Next slide. The Industrial Revolution in time brought progress to farming. As cities grew, farmers had to feed ever-growing populations. First tractors started appearing on farming fields. Even then, though, there was no question of limited resources. Weather was an issue, so was the price of commodities, but access to land, water remained unencumbered. Next slide. With the substantial growth of population, especially city population, farming industry remained focused on maximizing output by using fertilizers since 1950s, introducing large irrigation projects in the former Soviet Union, and investing in GMOs like in the United States. The large-scale farming started having impact on the environment, but the drive to feed the world was always the priority. And the last slide. Those were the main issues for a very long time. Even in early 2000s, when the main focus of the industry has been on maximizing output to provide affordable food to ever-growing world population. And the graph above actually shows the population since I was born, I think, doubled in number, while the available arable land hasn't really changed that much, which obviously resulted that there needed to be much higher output to feed this growing population on Earth. So last 10 years, however, changed the debate in the agri-sector. Yes, many are still concerned with the ability of the sector to feed the world, but many others are concerned with the impact the sector has had on the environment at large. Climate change and agri-sector's substantial contribution to the greenhouse gases emissions are forcing a rethink. Can we produce more with less use of water? Can we ensure that the soil is properly managed so that it continues supporting us for the generations to come? How do we stop or perhaps reverse climate change to protect our arable land? Should we continue eating meat? Those are the questions we all face. The topic of today's webinar is likely to offer one of the answers to those questions. It's not going to be the answer, but a piece in a puzzle to solve this climate change conundrum. I hope that after this webinar, we will have a much better understanding of what is precision agriculture, how it helps with addressing the climate impact of the agricultural activities, while helping to feed the world. It is for everyone. Is it for everyone? And can a small farm in Kazakhstan benefit from it in the same way as a large farming company would? I'm looking forward to hearing what is behind precision agriculture. Iurii Petruk, who calls himself an AgTech evangelist, will guide us through the world of precision farming. Iurii is the head of the board of AgTech Ukraine and has spent most of his professional life promoting advanced digital technologies in agriculture. So Iurii will be making the presentation next. I think that I see Nemanja on the screen, but I think we will provide answers to the polling after the presentation. Thank you.
Okay. I hope you can already see my screen and already can enjoy the presentation. Thank you, Wojtek, thank you for the introduction. Today, I'm going to talk about data-driven technologies, technologies which increase profitability and bring sustainability into agriculture. Today, we're going to dive into precision farming to understand how it works and how the future of industrial agriculture looks like. Okay, and let me start with definitions. There are a lot of wordings and different terms which actually describe the same meaning. And I want to clarify it first to move forward with common understanding. And first term I want to explore is digital agriculture. It is a big umbrella term which describes a whole spectrum of tech products and services which are used along agri-food value chain. It covers technological solutions for crop farming, horticulture, meat and dairy business, food processing industry, greenhouses, vertical farms, and so on. But today we are still something is going not well, to talk about precision farming. It is a set of data-driven GIS-based technologies designed for stock-traded and cash crops. By GIS-based, I mean that every piece of data should have its coordinates on the field. And the main aim of precision farming is maximize profitability of every land parcel across the field, based on its spatial data inequality insights. To make it simpler, precision farming divides the field into productivity zones, and every zone is maintained separately to create optimal conditions for plants development. Precision farming is actually changing the old school approach, where we used one field, as a single operations unit to optimize processes, with a new school-driven approach. It is data-driven. Just imagine that you can monitor the well-being of every single plant on your field. It is really possible with precision farming. Yeah. And now let's have a look how this shift from field to plant became real. Let's start with key principles of both approaches. With old school approach, we had field-sized based decision-making and equal resources distribution. Also, the processes were unified for the whole field, which means we spreaded fixed norms of seeds and chemicals across the whole field with no regard to its territory differences. The only benefit here was that it was easy to implement with any kind of equipment. On the other hand, we have a modern approach, which involves spatial patterns-based decision-making with resources redistribution. In other words, in more productive zones, we seed more, fertilize more, spray more, and finally harvest more. For low productivity parcels, we create lower crop density with less chemicals to optimize growing conditions for plants and maintain the yield quality. Usually, this approach saves you some amount of inputs, which results with increased cost efficiency. Now let's talk about results delivered by both approaches. With unification way, you gain a lot of hidden problems. First of all, you spoil a lot of resources, as they cannot be used due to existing limitation factors on different field zones. Also, you have production quality issues, as there are a lot of non-conditional grains, usually not ripe or properly developed. They increase moisture content and decrease chemical properties of the yield. Consequently, you need to spend additional costs for cleaning, drying, calibration, and other costly operations. On high productivity areas, you have another issue. For grain crops and rape, it is possible to get a real yield loss due to crop over-ripening. And you have completely different picture with precision farming approach implementation. You harvest a maximal amount of high-quality yield, which doesn't require post-harvest treatment. Basically, with precision farming, we replace input distribution uniformity with yield quality uniformity and profitability maximization. It sounds like reasonable enough for business. Here we have an illustration to better understand how it works. On the left side, you can see the uniformal approach example. In the squares, all the squares on the field grid are green, because equal amounts of seeds and chemicals were applied through the entire field. But as a result, when it comes to harvesting, we see green spots on the field. And it is due to unequal ripening of wheat, which involves, as I told, additional cleaning and drying of grains. On the right side, we see a variable rate application map, which takes into account spatial variability data. And as a result, we have uniform ripening, which leads to better quality yield with no need to post-harvesting operations. All precision farming technologies became possible due to data. Data which is collected from different sources, stored, processed, visualized to become basement for decision-making and precision farming technologies implementation. Now let's briefly go through types of data which are used to make precision farming real. We have 4 major types of data sources. First one is manual input data, which is put into the system by people and still cannot be obtained automatically. It can be crop hybrid name, field plant scouting data, or laboratory analysis information. The next one is data about field operations, which we automatically obtain from the equipment, from field equipment. It shows us tractor tracks, operation speed, fuel consumption, seeding density, pesticides application amounts, etc. To get such types of data, you need to have a compatible equipment. Next type is sensor data. It's usually collected from weather stations, soil moisture probes around the field, and handheld sensors, like penetrol loggers and end sensors, and so on. It brings you local information about exact field conditions. This data is crucial sometimes to make timely decisions and field calibrations. Remote sensing data is actually the most available and most informative data source, which is available for free and doesn't require any equipment purchase. At the moment, agriculture uses only a small amount of available insights from remote sensing. For example, there are about 80 available vegetation indexes for farmers, but they actually use only one NDVI and sometimes few others. Now, let's have a look how this data is corresponding with precision farming technologies and field operations. Here we have a scheme which would help us to structurize the order of processes and understand how precision farming works. The basement for all precision farming is GIS software, where we collect all the information about field spatial inequalities and differences, from soil mapping, satellites and drone monitoring, field sensors, and mobile scouting by agronomists. On the next level, we got GPS guidance. It enables precise placement of all further field operations. And it also provides geographically positioned data collection from the field equipment. GPS guidance can be represented either by autopiloting or by parallel driving with steering assistance. It helps to avoid overlaps and gaps, and it gives the possibility to use the same wheel tracks from operation to operation and from year to year. A variable rate application, or VRA, is the crown of precision farming. It uses data from all previous operations to bring the ability to change the inputs applications amounts with high precision in order to maximally, optimally use the productivity potential of every land parcel. Variable rate application includes VR seeding with density control, VR fertilizing, and VR spraying with precise chemicals dosage control, and VR irrigation, where we control amounts of water applied in correlation with soil parameters. Also, local weather data is used in order to optimize all VRA operations. Now, when we understand the principal scheme of precision farming, let's move to its step-by-step practical integration. First thing we need to understand, it's impossible to start using VRA without basic technologies integrated. Every next layer of technology is based on previous one, and its integration requires trials and adjustments to find the optimal set of parameters for every field and for every crop and for its combination. As everywhere, you start with learning. You need to learn about existing technologies, their benefits and compatibility between each other, because sometimes they are not really working together. Then you put all your existing data into the farm management software to get your farm digital passport, let's name it so. This systematization already gives you a lot of insights about your fields. On the next step, you start using different field mapping services for soil conditions, for vegetation dynamics, for yield metrics. And every of those integrations already brings you a lot of value itself. You much better understand the field productivity zones and start to identify limiting factors. GPS guidance integration is the new level, which brings you the ability to optimize your field operations. It excludes gaps and overlaps. It reduces human factor, which is pretty suffering point of farmers. And it gives you ability to work 24/7. And it is finally allowing you to move to the final and the most expensive part of precision farming, variable rate application, where you can really optimize field input distribution for every pixel of land using the most advanced and precise equipment control. Now, let's get a bit deeper into technology itself. If you zoom our planet's surface and its view from the space, as you usually do with Google Maps, first of all, we would see continents, then countries, cities, roads, and probably you would even find your home. And if you zoom enough, you would see pixels, grid of squares, which size determines image quality and resolution. In precision farming, we also have pixel optimization principle. It is based on separate maintenance of every pixel of land within the field, based on individual parameters. In the picture, you can see the same area, but it is divided into two parts with different pixel sizes, 250 and 30 meters. It illustrates how much more details you can get with higher resolution. Most of information about the field has the pixel size, as one set of data parameters can precisely describe only a pretty small piece of land. But there is one source of data which usually determines the precision of our information. It is remote sensing data, which we collect mostly from satellites and drones. Here you see the illustration of how most common aerial imagery pixel sizes determine the precision of your field patterns identification and resultingly decision making. 250 meters pixel is applicable only for rough field zoning. 30 meters is already can be used for basic VRA maps. 10 meters precision is good enough for most of field crops to get precise variable rate application maps. And drone imagery is precise enough to go with plant-based decision making. But these data have not always been available. First satellite data became public in early 2000s with 250 and 30 meters resolution. Then it took some time to convert raw data into metrics which were practically applicable for agriculture. Through further years, amount of satellites increased together with the resolution they provide. Starting from 2016, we got 10 meters precise free satellite data from Sentinel group of satellites. And there are a lot of paid options which could deliver you imagery with up to 30 centimeters precision. Now you know the answer. But it can be done only on demand. The only disadvantage of satellites is that they are not seen through the clouds. But drones can fly under the clouds and whenever you want. It can deliver high-resolution imagery. However, its data still need a lot of calibration. And on this slide, you see how precise is drone imagery comparing to most commonly used 10 meters resolution satellite data. But let's come back on the ground, as all the decisions based on aerial data still should be applied on the field. And here we also have a parameter which determines pixel size on the implementation side. It is the precision of your VRA equipment. There are basically three options. It can be either full implement width, or section control, or distribution unit precision, let's say like a spray nozzle, or seeding aggregate. We should take into account that actual pixel size with which you are working is determined by the technology with the lowest resolution applied on the exact field. For example, if you would be using the drone monitoring with super high resolution, but our seeding machine, which have no seeders and no sections control, then our pixel size would be determined by seeding machine width multiplied by the amount of meters needed to change seeding density, as you probably can see on the first left picture. Now, I think it is enough of technical information, and let's get back to business. Still, the main aim of precision farming is to increase profitability. With precision farming, we spend less due to preliminary planning and optimize use of resources. Also, we save time and money because of on-time decisions and execution. Also, we exclude post-harvest treatment of the yield. Regarding additional earnings, we gain it because of minimal field losses and better yield quality, which brings actually better selling price. If you follow this logic, it is obvious that precision farming is a desired instrument for any farmer. But there are really a lot of constraints on the path of its practical implementation. And it is more or less connected to economy of scale. First of all, you need to have qualified personnel, which is quite challenging for small and medium farmers. Then you need to go and understand that precision farming really works only for comparably big fields with visible spatial differences. If you have no spatial differences, like in some fields in Australia, precision farming is not really working for you. Then you need, if you go to purchasing of farming equipment, precision farming equipment, it should be used at maximum capacity to finally bring you additional profit. It becomes a problem when you don't have enough land to utilize it fully, or you need to share it with somebody to reach economic effect. That's why most of small and medium farmers stop integration of precision farming on stage of field mapping or GPS guidance. And integration of VRA technologies becomes affordable only for big producers and cooperatives. Nevertheless, precision farming is moving forward, and a lot of its possible benefits are yet to come. So let's talk about prospective technologies and solutions for precision farming. And I want to start with precision farming service companies as a really prospective option for business. As a lot of farmers are not able to purchase equipment themselves, there is a whole blue ocean for service providers to cover this gap. It's also connected to distributed planning because it can give you understanding of field processes optimization and also optimize equipment use, logistics, and increase food sustainability. Soil carbon sequestration monitoring is the next big opportunity to earn money on your fields. As precision farming data already brings more than enough information to count CO2 fixation from the air, and CO2 emissions quotas step by step becoming tradable units. Regarding technologies, there is a bright future for electric and hydrogen-powered tractors. And the market is completely ready for autonomous robotic platforms for field operations. Due to quarantine, is it good or bad? You decide, but the biggest world agricultural equipment vendors started to push the legal part. And I hope during the next few years, driverless autonomous vehicles would be allowed to use at least in the fields. Another prospective technology is use of small robot swarms and drone swarms for agricultural needs. There are a lot of existing concepts which are designed to replace big heavy machines and make field operations more ecological, faster, and maximally flexible. And as today we live in the world of climate change and rapid population growth, at this last slide, I want to talk about sustainability and ecological aspects of precision farming. It really has a prospective impact on agriculture compared to a convenient farming approach. Precision farming approach helps to reduce soil compaction, reduce unjustified losses, decrease CO2 emissions, reduce chemical pressure, reduce soil and water pollution, preserve soil due to nutrients deficit refill, and it also brings a lot of useful information for further fruit traceability. Actually, I hope my presentation did you make you feeling asleep, and it would help you to fully enjoy the conversation of our panelists and bring some motivation to you to integrate precision farming into your farm, if you haven't done it yet. Thank you for the attention, and let the precision be with you.
Well, thank you very much, Iurii. Definitely didn't make us fall asleep. Your description of swarm of drones flying around, I think, was very interesting. But of course, the last slide, which talked about the sustainability element, saving on CO2 emissions, I think it was very, very powerful. And I think that's what will be driving a lot of companies as well in the future, because sustainability will become just a good business. And I think that's what they will want to do. So thank you very much for your presentation. I think it was very, very interesting. So before we go to the panel discussion, I think Nemo has got answers from the first polling. We'll take that, and then we move to the panel conversation. Thank you again, Iurii.
Thanks, Wojtek. So I hope the answers are showing now on your right-hand side of the screen. The answer, as you heard from Iurii as well, the correct answer is 30 by 30 centimeters. And this is something that slightly more than half of our audience knew. So good job. I think we have a well-educated audience. And then a few people answered some of the other options. But that's it for the first question.
Thank you very much, Nemo. So let's move to our panel. It's my pleasure to introduce our panelists to you. First, we've got Ms. Inbal Becker-Reshef, who is the director at NASA Harvest. Inbal is based in France and works on advancing the use of satellite data for agricultural monitoring on the field, supporting decisions in food security and agricultural markets. We also have got Mr. Ievgen Osypov, who is the CEO of KERNEL. Ievgen, for many years, was piloting the introduction of digital technologies in the company, making KERNEL a leader in this field. Ievgen is based in Ukraine, and for those who don't know Ukrainian market, which I'm sure there are not that many, but those who don't know Ukrainian market, KERNEL is one of the largest agricultural companies in the country with over 500,000 hectares under management, if I'm not mistaken. Then we also have Mr. Andreas Huber, who is a representative of CORTEVA. Andreas, who is based in Switzerland, is leading a team of field scientists and field station networks in the region that are working to develop new integrated solutions for farmers. And last but not least, we've got Mr. Dmitry Prikhodko. He's a friend of EBRD, and we've worked together for many years, who is a senior economist at the FAO Investment Center. Dmitry is based in Italy, and for many years has been working to promote sustainable investments in agribusiness to ensure global food security. Most recently, Dmitry led the study commissioned by EBRD on digital technologies in agriculture. So before we move to the discussion, I think it's time to wake everybody up, and next polling question. Nemo.
Yes. So I'm going to open the poll now. I hope again you can see it on your screens. The question is, do you apply precision farming techniques and technologies in your own business? And the options are no, I'm not farming, B, no, C, yes to some extent, or D, yes intensively. So this will be open for another 2 minutes. Thank you.
Thanks very much. So time for our discussions, and we will start with Dmitry Prikhodko. As I mentioned earlier, recently EBRD commissioned a study which was conducted by FAO to assess the level of digitalization of agriculture and adoption of precision farming practices across some of our countries where the EBRD operates. Dmitry, could you please comment on the outcomes of this study? What is the level of digitalization of agriculture, and what are the main reasons why farmers invest, or perhaps don't invest, in precision farming? Thank you.
Thanks, Wojtek, and thanks, colleagues from EBRD, for invitation. It is indeed that we did the study together, and we surveyed 500 farmers in Ukraine, including 10 agro-holding farms. And actually, I'd like to thank Mr. Osypov for KERNEL's active participation. So we surveyed 10 agro-holding farms. So the total sample size covered about 15% of Ukraine area. Thanks, Vasil, for bringing up the slide. So what survey revealed, and again, it is representative at each of the farm size categories, is that precision agriculture technologies, and Iurii described them so well, are already in use on 28% of Ukrainian grain area. 28% of farmers already use it. 52% are interested to use precision agriculture technologies, and only 20% are not familiar. There is a direct link between the interest in precision agriculture technologies and farm size. This is very natural. So about 80% of farmers who farm on 1,000 hectares and above are interested in precision agriculture technologies. That tells you, the level of interest. And quantifying precision agriculture technologies are already used on about 8.4 million hectares, or about 45% under cereals in Ukraine, and cereals is the main, cereals and oilseeds. Cereals and the oilseeds are the two main crops. So in total, that's about 25% of area in Ukraine. Of course, these technologies are complex and they're used to different extents. Next slide. Speaking of the main reasons why farmers invest, and as you can see, they do invest, Wojtek, is of course profit maximization. It's the economic efficiency. So when we asked these 500 farmers about the reasons why they invest in precision agriculture technologies, we heard on the scale from 1 to 5. Most answers were about, surprisingly, labor cost reduction, overall profitability increase, and that really links to all other questions. Input cost reduction, reduced use of fertilizers, plant protection chemicals, fuel, and others. Yield increase, and environmental aspects that were mentioned, such as a reduced application of mineral fertilizers, plant protection chemicals, reduced soil compaction. They were the least mentioned reason why farmers in Ukraine invest in agriculture. It is very new and fresh for Ukrainian farmers. 58% of respondents used precision agriculture technologies for only 5 years or less. So looking at these two pictures, not everyone can produce such a nice, even field, which avoids overlaps as on the picture on the right. And as I mentioned, different farmers use different levels of precision. Only 10% of respondents use the full range of precision agriculture technologies. So that is quite surprising and shows about potential. And so there is significant room for further sophistication of grain production. And I think I would stop here, Wojtek, and turn over to you.
All right. Thank you, Dmitry. I think those are, again, it's always interesting to see analysis of the study showing what is the actual interest on the ground in those type of new technologies. Nemo, isn't it time for the next for revealing the answers to the second polling question?
Indeed, I'm back. So yes, for the question on whether our audience applies precision farming techniques, technologies already, as I hope you can see, most of them are not farmers themselves, but then we have, for answers C and D, yes to some extent, or yes intensively, we have 18 and 13% correspondence accordingly. So we do have some audience who is already in this field. Thank you. Back to you, Wojtek.
Thank you. So now we'll move on from sort of a bigger picture to those who actually implement precision agriculture on the ground. And Ievgen and KERNEL has been experimenting for a long time in bringing digital technologies across the company and has become a leader in the country. So could you maybe tell us when did KERNEL decide to invest in precision farming, and how has it been, and what are the lessons learned from this? Thank you.
Thank you for the invitation on this webinar. At first for us it was a huge challenge because we acquired land lease rights for 400,000 hectares of land, and it was a huge challenge how to operate this land as best as possible. And then we looked around the world. There were no farm management system or some special software to manage such big amount of land. And we need to go step by step to implement this technology on our land bank and on our activity. The first idea in our roadmap was how to make our disadvantage to our advantage. What disadvantage we have? 500,000 hectares of land. It's very difficult to control. It's very difficult to manage. And there are no company in the world who operates this business for a long time, and we could make some benchmark and maybe to study something. We need to do everything by our own. From the other side, we have a lot of data from each of our field. We have a lot of information, and it was our advantage. In such case, 4 years ago, we started a project. We named it DAP, Digital Agribusiness. Could you show a slide? It's 1 and 2 slides of our presentation. Vasil. Perfect. Yeah. What is digital agribusiness? Now, for us, digital agribusiness, it's the platform like ERP system to manage the agribusiness and farming activity. And everything what was described in presentation of Iurii Petruk, like the theory, how to do it, we realize it on our software product and on this ERP system. It consists from the DAP planning, agro-monitoring, scouting tools, dispatcher center, GIS portal, etc., of other points. And it's very important not only looking on the field, but also looks on the whole environment, on the logistics, on the inputs, on the market, on the everything. And we put all this information to our ERP system. Now it's enable us to manage more than 500,000 hectares of land. And by this parameter, we are not the biggest company in the world, because now we know a company worldwide who operates more than 1 million hectares, for example. But on our lands, we produce 3.5 million tons of grains per year. And as far as I know, for this parameter, we are company #1 in the world. It means that we manage our land as most efficient level because we produce more grains on this land plot. From the other side, now we understand that then we have the special ERP system for agribusiness. Now there are no limits for us for multiplication of this business in the future. And to be honest, now we are ready to manage 1 million hectares, 2 million hectares. Now it doesn't make, it's no difficult for us to manage big volumes of land because we have a special platform for this. From the other side, we are, as you mentioned, we are one of the biggest Ukrainian agri company, and also we are the biggest trader in infrastructure company. And we are interested in that Ukraine should be growing in grain production, more export revenue comes to the country. And 3 years ago, we started project. It's named Open Agribusiness. And in this project, we started to share our knowledge with the farmers. Because like it was mentioned in the preceding presentation, only 30% of farmers know about the precision technology and started to implement it on their farms. All of our partners, and now we have partners, it's about 25% of Ukrainian market, they are open to welcome, to study our technologies that we use. And for example, we have a special platform for Agri Benchmark with slide 8 and 9. Super. Slide 9. Next one. Perfect. For example, now we have under satellite moratorium more than 500 hectares of land of our own land that we operate. And we put this special platform, Open Agribusiness AgriHub. And here all of our partners can see more than 100,000 of land managing by KERNEL with all technology, with all vegetation information, with everything. And they put their lands and fields to this portal. And now it's 500,000 hectares benchmarking monitoring. There each farm could see the other and to increase their technology level and to increase their knowledge about technology. If we move to the precision agriculture, 4 years ago, we started what disadvantages we have due to the we made it waste of inputs because we understand that some amount of inputs we are not using in the proper way. And the next point was the less of yields, because in some case we are not using the yields potential of the field or some plots. And average, we estimated that we lost around $200 per each hectare. And with help of precision technologies, for example, like autopilot and variable chemical inputs and row sense on our sprayers and section control on the sprayers and seeders, now we save around $50 per each hectare because of the right management of inputs. And for the other side, we increase our yields, and also we get more than $50 with the yields. It means that totally we have the effect more than $100 per each hectare, and our total investment in this project was $2 million in software product, in ERP system, and it's developing. We still have some investment in this product, and around $3 million in machinery, some sensors, and etc. of infrastructure. For us, what's it mean? It means that, to be honest, we make the investment and have the refund less than 1 year in this precision agriculture technology, but not only in this technology, but to manage all items that we have in agribusiness with supply inputs, with logistics and planning, etc. of important points in this. And also at the same time, we believe that we help for our partners our suppliers of grains to our infrastructure, also to increase their efficiency and to increase their yields.
Thank you. So can I couple of follow-up questions?
Yeah.
You've actually answered a few of them that I wrote down as you were speaking. But you said that your size was a disadvantage, but of course it was also an advantage because it gave you the ability to invest perhaps larger amounts than somebody with much smaller access to funds would be able to do. So you said you invested 2 million in computer systems, 3 million in machinery and sensors. But does it? Am I right to assume that this is just a process? You're not finished investing in those new technologies. You are in a certain stage of it, but there is still new technologies that are coming and that you're looking at to employ.
Yeah, it's true. Every time we are going to be on the edge of modern technology, we are going to try everything new because we need to be the most efficient and we need to be on the edge. And in such case, our scale, it's a good advantage for us. Yeah, it's true.
So how much of your land is, obviously, is it true that all of your land is subject to this sort of a digital oversight? Yes?
Yeah.
But how much is all of it also subjected to precision farming, or how does it work?
If we look at the all technological points of precision farming, it's around 30 to 40% of our land. It's fully applied.
Okay. All right. I think that, is there any lesson learned from you that if somebody were starting to look at this precision farming now, what would you advise them to do or not to do? Because obviously there are always things you learn as you implement those projects.
You know, we understood several very important points. The first one that every farmer needs to understand the quality of their land and the differences of soil condition, because it was even a question in Q&A session from which size it makes sense to use precision technology. And the answer is, if you have a difference in your soil condition, that you need to use precision farming because you need to use a different technology. And this is the answer. The second one, you know, to analyzing a big volume of data, we understood that, you know, the farmers worldwide now in a very tough situation because all farmers are buying brands and selling commodities. It's very complicated to be effective. Then are you going to buy brands and to pay some extra value for brand name, and at the same time you need to save commodities. And now from the each inputs that we have, for example, from the fertilizer, from seeds, from crop protection, from machinery name, from everything. Now we really know the value of these items and the value of brand. And we separate the brand name value and the real cost, yeah, the value of this cost, yeah. And it's very important for us that we make the decision-making process, because we know the real cost and we know the real value of each of the products.
That's very interesting. Thank you. I do have a couple more questions about your platform that you share with other farmers, but we'll come back to that perhaps in a little bit later stage, if you don't mind.
You know, to be honest, we prepare some small video about this platform. It's possible maybe to run it in the end of this webinar, or to pass link to all of the.
I think from what Basil says, technologically that will not be possible to play it now, but I think we'll be very happy to add it as a link together with the recording of this video. So we will be very happy to look at it, and whoever else will be watching this webinar afterwards will, I'm sure, click on it as well. I'm sure it's very interesting. Yeah. So we'll do that. Thank you very much. We'll still come back to you, but now Nemo answers the next polling question.
Yes.
Thank you
so
very much.
As we move along in our conversation, the next question is, what do you think is the main bottleneck for the implementation of precision farming? And we have a few options: lack of knowledge, high costs, mentality, unclear benefits, or that it's sort of useful only for large farms. Thank you. Back to you, Wojtek.
Thanks, Nemo. So we're back to Dmitry. And I think as our conversation is progressing, we're recognizing the certain advantage that larger companies with a larger financial pool will have in their ability to introduce some of those techniques and technologies to their business. So would it be right to say that precision agriculture is increasing the gap between those large businesses operating on larger lands or other smaller SME type farmers? And if yes, then why, and how we can help to bridge that gap? Back to Dmitry.
Thanks, Wojtek. I have to admit that every technology has its early adopters, pioneers, and then people who are more traditionalist, who are very reserved in adopting new technology. Precision agriculture technology is not an exemption. I think the world of farming has gone that path with many technologies in the past, including the Green Revolution in the 60s. It is true that digital and precision agriculture technology specifically is expensive. So not everyone is lucky to pay back their costs as fast as KERNEL can do with their approach. Because most of our audience today are bankers, let me just give you some numbers that are not on this slide. But for a 10,000 hectare farm in Ukraine, it would cost about $600,000 to invest in precision agriculture technology at 10 by 10 centimeter level. Would this investment pay back? Most likely, yes. And again, as we're talking to bankers here, if we're to assume a 10-year payback period, and if we're to assume a very nice discount rate of about 7.5%, the break-even incremental increase in revenue from that technology would have to be $21 per hectare for that type of farm. Of course, it is not for everyone. So what we've seen in our research is that amongst those farmers who already use precision agriculture technologies, we see that 51% of these farmers plan to invest in further development of the technology, and translating these respondents into the land bank, into the land area, it's about 6.2 million hectares. Why do they invest? Is because they see opportunities to maximize their profit and get their money back. In fact, when I mentioned $21 per hectare, it's all relative. It's only about 2.5% of additional revenue from sales revenues from wheat. And it's even less. It's about 1.8%, less than 2% from maize. So these farmers do believe in investing in technology. And again, speaking of potential, it's 6.2 million hectares. Those traditionalists who currently do not use the technology There are some farmers who look very carefully at it. And what we've seen is that 18% of these farmers look at the potential for that technology. And these farmers farm on about 3.8 million hectares. So what we have in total for potential is that both early adopters and innovators and traditionalists, they're interested. Of course, they're interested to different extent. And the potential to advance the technology further in Ukraine is on the area of about 10 million hectares. So that would be about $600 million to $1 billion in terms of investment. So quite a sizable amount. Next slide. I already covered, the differences between the two, but at least from farmer perspective, this is what they think. They think that high initial costs are the main reason why they hold back on with their investment in precision agriculture technology. Uncertainty of revenue generation is another problem. Not everyone can come up with a clear business plan and see profitability upfront. They need to see it first working on someone else's field. Lack of professional staff, Iurii also mentioned it in the beginning. Compatibility issues between different systems, so the issue of integration of different systems, because precision agriculture is a very complex universe of systems. So it is clear that larger respondents mostly worry about the cost, but they also have very clear understanding of potential benefits. And you mentioned SMEs. SMEs and small farmers are very dear to the heart of FAO. I think the question here is about priorities for public support and how to support technology transfer. Specifically in that area, I think the European Union shows quite clear way with its rural development strategies. There is a whole section on innovation in the common agricultural policy. As one Bulgarian farmer said, he wouldn't have invested in precision agriculture technology if not the support provided by local research institutes. And that's what Ukrainian government and public institutions, together with businesses, need to focus on. It's excellent that KERNEL launches open agribusiness platform so smaller farmers can learn. I think the work that CORTEVA does also contributes in that direction to include smaller farms and link them with technology. I'll stop here and maybe if you have any questions.
No, but those are very important points. I guess, as you know, we've been promoting farmers to get together, creating cooperatives or strengthening their some form of cooperatives, strengthening their cooperation, the way they negotiate with traders, with seed providers, it strengthens their hand. Obviously, precision agriculture and application of technology to a larger sway of land will also decrease the cost for the same partners. So there's a role for farmers to play. There is a role for the state to play in bringing those technologies forward. So should we turn?
Absolutely.
Should we turn to Andreas now? And we sort of will continue in the same area of how can the smaller farmers be supported with bringing this technology forward, because it will benefit them, but it also will benefit environment at large. So what is their role for private commercial integrators to play to provide user-friendly solutions that can be accessible to those farmers to a certain extent to bring the precision agriculture forward? Andreas, what would you think?
Yes, I think it's the affordability comes always up as a problem to introduce precision farming, but we should not forget that there is the option to purchase it as a service. And you don't need always premium solutions for every farm. So you can solve a lot of problems and increase your profitability by purchasing a service like, for example, fertilization prediction tools, to optimize your nitrogen fertilization. I think we don't need to look always at the premium solutions, and particularly small farmers can benefit a lot from these services, which are not more expensive than the subscription fee to an advisor that farmers are also paying from time to time. And we have a very nice example that we purchased. So we had such a service in the US, started a couple of years ago, where farmers could save nitrogen fertilizers worth $55 per hectare. And this is a huge cost even for smaller farmers. When they can save this, then it's a good thing for them, adding to their bottom line. So I think precision farming, we need to make it clear what the value is for farmers. And I see two clear values here. One is the direct monetary benefit by reducing input costs like fertilizers, crop protection, because everything is much more precise. And usually precision means less input is needed in order to achieve the same yield. And the second benefit, which is very important, particularly for small farmers, is the labor saving. And Dmitry also showed that this is the highest concern of people. So labor saving ranks very high. For a small farmers depend very often on a second source of income. And they don't have the time to spend every day on their fields to monitor for diseases or pests. So monitoring systems, precision ag tools can help them to monitor their crop without being physically in the field, and can earn money in their second source of income. And this is a very important factor, particularly for smallholder farmers around the world. So for that reason, I think precision farming is both for the big as well as for the small farmers a valuable tool.
But in terms of the education or knowledge of those techniques or services available, do you think this is a role for the state to play, or is it the role for companies like yourself to advertise it more to the farmers?
It's certainly also the private sector has a big role to play, because services will become more important in the future. So agricultural industry will move from suppliers of inputs, chemical, nitrogen, seeds, also to a service provider for farmers. So it's our job to highlight the value of precision farming and to make it attractive for people to invest. And of course, it has to be simple. Any technology which is not simple will not be successful, because it will only be for the few who are technologically so advanced that they can deal with any complicated technology. Technology, if it wants to be successful, it has to be simple and user-friendly and affordable, of course. And this is the role that the private sector, I think, has to play to provide such solutions for the farmers.
And you mentioned this service that CORTEVA is offering in the US. Is it expanding, or is it going to be expanded into other parts of the world?
We are working on this, of course. So it was very successful in the Corn Belt of the US. So it's called Encirca, and it's a subscription-based software prediction tool where farmers can determine the nitrogen fertilization of their fields. And we have good data that shows average $55 savings in nitrogen. And of course, this also means less nitrogen emissions, because when you apply less nitrogen, you have less problems with nitrate leaching and runoff and so on. So it was a very nice tool, and it's actually it's a small step forward. It was a service that farmers could buy, and I'm sure in the future we'll bring much more of these service models.
And the farmers that you offer that, because in the US you also will have farmers who have large land holding. Were those farmers of various different size that picked it up, or who did it focus on?
Yes. So the typical farm size in the US is smaller than Ukraine, I have to say. So it's 500 to 1,000 hectares. Of course, these are full-time farmers, not part-time farmers mostly. But we have examples also from Japan, where farmers with half a hectare of stone fruits are using drones nowadays to monitor their crop, because they can't be in this orchard all the time, and they need to know when the disease hits in order to apply crop protection measures. So it's not necessarily a question of size of a farm. It's a question of what problem you need to solve. And smaller farmers have problems they can solve very easily with cheap technology, which is precision technology as well.
Well, thank you for that. I'll move on, and we'll come back a little bit later. Ievgen, you've already mentioned the Open Agribusiness Platform and the AgroHub. I guess one thing I'm not sure I understand. Why do you think it's a good business for KERNEL to offer it to other farmers as well?
You know, as I mentioned, the big part of our business is infrastructure business, trading, and crushing business. And in such case, we need to produce more grains to fulfill in our infrastructure. And in such case, there are no competition between us and other farmers for their efficiency. And it's a natural cooperation to support them to produce more and to be more profitable on their farms for us. It's quite simple.
It's a win-win situation.
Yes.
And do you charge for your service, or is it because of the fact that you are often off-taker of their products that the service comes as part of your relationship with them?
It's part of our relationship with our suppliers.
Okay. All right. I'm sort of mindful of the time, so I'll move on a little bit. Inbal, if I can bring you forward, precision farming can digitalize and standardize a lot of data on the ground. And the data from the ground can be further linked to the data from remote locations like satellites and then merged together. Is precision farming the missing link between the data that we get from satellites, supercomputers in the field? Where does NASA Harvest see the potential for partnership with the farmers?
Great, thanks very much for the question. And if I can maybe ask for the slides, I'll maybe just, I think satellite data has been mentioned in several different pieces of this, and that's really the perspective I bring. And just stepping back a second on this is, as a lot of you are probably aware, we've got a lot of different types of satellites circling the Earth continuously and collecting a huge amount of data that is also very relevant for agriculture and agricultural monitoring. And so while they offer information on a daily basis, and I think as we've already heard and the poll brought forward, we've really seen a huge advances in the satellite side. And today we do have 10-meter resolution data every 3 to 5 days globally, and are seeing a lot more, for example, 3-meter data much more cheaply available than it ever was before and on a daily basis. And so at the same time, satellites also provide a long-term data record, and that's also really important for whether we're looking at global trends or down at the field scale, if you're trying to understand how have yields changed, how have they responded to different climatic factors or to management practices. And so satellite data are able to provide a lot of information, but, and if you maybe go to the next slide, I think while we keep thinking, especially on the satellite data side, we hear a lot of this talk about big data. In order to run satellite models and to really get the use out of them, whether we're trying to map croplands, whether we're trying to map farming practices, map tillage practices, or forecast yields, or look at stress, any of these factors, we need ground data in order to train these data, train models in order to validate the models. And so while I can run a model and I'll always get a result, of course, if it's really going to be grounded in reality, we do have to have that ground data. And I would say that that's one of the main roadblocks today for really realizing the potential of satellite data. I think in the past, it would have been the data availability, the data quality, the cost, or being able to compute that data. And so I think while we've been hearing for over 40 years now big promises in terms of what satellite data can bring to agriculture, today we've overcome a lot of those initial technological challenges. And now one of the big challenges I think still is having the enough ground data to really train and run models. And so of course we already are doing a lot of this, But I think that there is a lot of room for partnering with farmers and partnering with the private sector side to really look at, there's obviously a lot of combine data that is being collected and a lot of data that is being collected, and making sure that we're able to use that to advance the technologies and applications that satellite data can provide. And I think that links very well with some of the discussion already ongoing between doing the research that's really driven by the needs, right? So you don't want researchers sitting and thinking about, what is it that I think is going to be interesting to do, but really making sure that that is meeting the needs, and then helping to develop these services that you've been talking about that then can be taken off on the private sector side. And so to give an example, I think, we do have to get much more creative about how do we find ways of doing these partnerships that are win-win, that make sense. And I think one of the things we did under NASA Harvest is we partnered with Swiss Re, where we were looking at how do we make their costs and make more efficient the loss adjustment process. And we did this in Ukraine. Over 2 years, we collected about 5,000 samples per year across Ukraine. And we were able to show that we could explain more than 70% of the variability in yields at the field scale, and able to save about 20% of the costs incurred in collecting these crop cuts. So being able to help them also to guide how many crop cuts, can we reduce the number of fields they visit, and then also within the fields where they're doing those crop cuts, really guided by satellite data. And so we were able to reduce also the number of crop cuts by 50%. And this is just one example of how I think we can find better ways to do this and to partner. I think from our perspective, what we were really interested in is being able to improve our yield forecasting capabilities and to be able to understand at a better level, how do we advance our models for crop condition, for alerts, for yield, for crop type identification by farmers. And next slide, please. And so, one of the things that we're actually very concerned about doing with satellite data and why we want to be able to improve these models is a lot of what on our side, on the NASA Harvest side, and in an initiative called GeoGlem, is really looking at how do we help in general and reduce uncertainty during the growing season, and where is the opportunity window for remote sensing to provide information. And that's really when the crop is in the ground, but before harvest. And this is looking at a slide from former USDA chief economist who we're working with, Joe Glauber, and looking at the USDA forecast errors over Brazil for soybeans over a 20-year period, where each line is a different year. And what you see is that the uncertainty is getting resolved the closer that they got to harvest, and really where satellite data can provide a lot of information and advantage is it during that window. And that's whether you're looking at the global scale or down at the field scale. And so what one of the big areas that we have been focused in for a long time, and the next slide, and is providing global information. And so this is through something called the Crop Monitor. We're working very closely with the group at AMIS at FAO as well on this, and many partners around the world to provide information driven by satellite data, but with, of course, ground information and weather information coming in to look at global crop conditions. This is just from our last report. That's highlighting where crops are going well and where we can provide alerts on where we need to be paying more attention. And that's, for example, the yellow, and where crop conditions are poor, and that's in the red. And obviously you see a lot of yellow and red over Europe. The yellow in Ukraine is due to dry conditions for planting at the moment. And then we provide information as well on that pie chart that's showing the breakdown per crop. I'm just showing wheat here, but we do rice and soybeans and maize as well. How much of each country is being impacted. So again, for us, is really important to be able to advance these types of applications that we can do with satellite data. If you go to the next slide, please. We're working on trying to, sorry, and again, next, yeah. And so here are some examples of yield forecasting where we've done a lot of work at global scale, at a national scale and subnational scale, really working and training these models with statistics. We're now much more moving into working at the field scale. And so all the way on the right, you're looking at examples of yield forecasting at the field scale. And I'm giving examples here from Argentina, as well as in the US. And that bottom image is showing On the one side are yield forecasts based on satellite data, and then on the right side is the yield from the combine. Of course, with the advantage of the satellite data is that we were able to produce these forecasts ahead of harvest. And in terms of the discussion today, you see the variability in that field. And of course, if as has been discussed already, if you're able to get insights about, where is it that I have stress? Is it due to nitrogen or need for irrigation or anything else? Satellite data can provide a lot of that information. But again, I think as you stated, the missing link is really how do we continue to improve these models and find ways to have the data that can train these. So I'll maybe just one more slide I'll show on this topic is we're also working on not only yield, but crop type identification. And that serves us a lot of purposes. One of them is to do area estimates. And we were this year to look at some area estimates in southern Russia early in the season. And so we did map winter wheat in southern Russia and came up with estimates based on satellite data back in June, well when official numbers and harvest obviously occurred. Maybe I'll stop there.
Thank you. And how many years of data have you collected so far?
So I guess from the satellite perspective, it depends on what satellite you're talking about. One of probably the primary satellites that has really been used for a long time is something called MODIS, and that was launched in 2000. And I think if Iurii showed in one of his slides, the 250 meter resolution pixel, and that's what MODIS has provided for years, and it's been incredibly valuable for being able to move it forward. It provides daily data globally. But of course, it depends on the application. And I think one of the important things really is to be able to use these in synergy. And so you want that kind of coarser resolution, but really high quality daily. And in fact, MODIS was actually twice a day providing data, going down to perhaps not as frequent data, but or not as high quality data, but at finer resolutions. And so we really need those combination of satellites and systems to be able to provide the applications that are necessary. And again, whether that's alert systems or whether that's providing precision agriculture or understanding better sustainability practices and their impact over the long term. But again, the ground data that we have is very limited. And so traditionally we've really used national statistics. But of course, if I'm doing, if I'm developing a model for Ukraine at the oblast level, I'm never going to get at, the very low yields or the very high yields from national statistics. And so to really able to understand how do we better improve these models, we've got to get down at the ground level.
Understood. Thank you for that. I'll keep moving. I think, Nimo, I think we've missed revealing the results of the last question. And now it's also a time for question number 4, if I'm
Yes. So I'll show the answer to the previous question just to sort of round it off. Also, clearly from what the speakers have been discussing in this previous section, in terms of the bottlenecks to the implementation of precision farming, 34% of the audience thinks it's the high costs, and then 17% the lack of knowledge. And then I'll now open the next question, which will again sort of announce, let's say, moving for our conversation to move. Which of these precision farming technologies has the highest sustainability potential? Variable rate nitrogen application, variable rate irrigation, controlled traffic farming, machine guidance, variable rate pesticides application, or variable rate seeding. So again, this will be open for 2 minutes. Thank you.
And since we're doing this, it's also worth reminding that if you have questions to the panelists, please put them in the chat section, if I'm not mistaken, so we can ask them at the very end. So moving on to the area that's also close to EBRD's heart, sustainability of precision farming. Dmitry, how would you address this point? Clearly, there are precision farming allows companies to use fewer resources to get the outcome. But is this also a carbon credit ready technology? What would you say? Dmitry? You're mute.
Sorry. Thanks, Wojtek. It's an excellent question. I guess the answer to it really depends on whether there is a carbon market to begin with. But let me step back and explain that when it comes to Ukraine, agriculture is not the most polluting industry. It accounts for about 13% in country's greenhouse gas emissions. However, as companies have intensified crop farming, what we've seen is that we've seen 4-time increase in emissions coming from mineral fertilizer application in the last 20 years in Ukraine. So we have to realize that agriculture has a profound impact on the environment. It's not only about livestock, and I'm sure that EBRD colleagues are well know now about negative impact of livestock on the environment, but crop farming has also negative impact on the environment. And I guess the slide shows the answer to the pollen question. So European Commission's Joint Research Center ranked available precision agriculture technologies in terms of their greenhouse gas emission reduction potential in the following way. The most important and the most promising technology is the variable rate nitrogen application. So on the scale from 1 to 5, that technology has the highest potential to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. This is when fertilizers are applied only to the parts of the fields that need it, as Iurii showed to us. So, and then the next technologies are variable rate irrigation, controlled traffic farming, machine guidance, variable pesticide applications. This all seems to be quite obvious. So yes, precision agriculture has significant potential to become carbon credit. Why I say it has significant potential? Because again, that technology requires a whole universe to exist around it. There has to be carbon market in the first place. So let's assume that there would be carbon market in Ukraine, and that Ukraine would be trading these carbon credits at the level of EU emission trading system. Okay, that's the system which exists in the European Union, where polluting industries can buy carbon credit. Again, it's let's say more mandatory type of system where companies have to go to buy. And in 2019, the price of CO2 carbon emission there, or carbon credit, was $24.8 euros per ton, nearly 25 euros per ton. So if we are to assume that price, and if we're to assume climate mitigation potential from the reduced use of nitrogen fertilizers in Ukrainian grain farming, what we see is that, assuming 10 to 30% reduction potential, is that Ukraine would be able to substantially reduce its CO2 emissions coming from crop farming. And if we're to monetize these reductions in emissions, these would be between 25 to 66 million euros. Of course, that's quite conditional as to whether there is a functioning market where farmers can go and sell these credits. It is dependent on the system as to whether there are consulting companies and certification schemes where it would be possible to verify by actually how much farmers reduced the application of nitrogen fertilizers and emissions, and many other factors. But I think, to answer your question, yes, there is a potential, but probably no, it's not yet carbon credit ready, unless it is applied in some countries where there are already functioning markets, certification systems, and even in these countries, in order to get the carbon credit, companies would have to also adapt other sustainable technologies in addition to just reduced nitrogen fertilizer application. I hope I answered your question here, Wojtek.
You have. Thank you very much for that. Okay, moving on. Nemo, I think it's again your turn. Reveal the results of the last question and present the last one for this session.
Exactly. So I think, again, the audience sort of anticipated Dmitry's presentation very well. 32% say variable rate nitrogen application has the highest sustainability potential, 19% variable rate irrigation, and 19% variable rate pesticide application. And then, yes, moving to the final question. I think, again, a bit of a, let's say, quiz before we finish. If we were to produce the same amount of wheat we produce today, but with technology and productivity from 30 years ago, we would need to cultivate additional land equivalent to the territory of Luxembourg, Belgium, Ukraine, or USA. So again, 2 minutes open poll. Thank you.
Thanks very much. So Andreas, we're going back to the precision agriculture and sustainability question. Do you think, what is your view on precision agriculture being part of the answer in sort of fight against the climate change and increasing productivity while retaining sustainability of the sector?
Yes, I think I can maybe also show a slide there, so to show maybe some examples what precision agriculture actually can do. It's probably the next one, or the one more. So here you see an example of what precision agriculture can do. Iurii mentioned at the very beginning that we can measure every plant, and this is true. So we can actually see what every plant is doing on a field. And even homogeneous or apparently homogeneous fields are very different in terms of organic carbon content, water content on each square meter. So you can see very clearly what's happening on this field, and this allows farmers to intervene with this slide here is showing, for example, the activity of photosynthesis. This could be due to a disease, it could be due to lack of water, it could be due to something else. And this will allow farmers to intervene very specifically on this plot of land and doesn't have to intervene in the other areas which are green. And I think this is the key to sustainability, that we reduce the waste, because every agricultural input that we are using on a field which is not needed, whether it's nitrogen fertilization, whether it's a crop protection measure, whether it is water, it is wasted because it is just emitted from this field. It's not taken up by the plant and does not translate into harvest. What is also very important, I think, for growers is that this data is somehow translated into harvest. And you see this here on the right, on the left side. There is technology available, and we are using this for our trials as well, where you can measure with a camera, you can measure the length of a corn ear from your combine when you harvest your corn, and you measure exactly the yields per square meter. So you can translate basically these red spots or green spots to the yield data that you have from this area of land. So it's very highly resoluted, and it will lead to less input or optimized input on agricultural land. And this is, of course, for the very heterogeneous fields, this is what farmers need because agricultural emissions are usually coming from heterogeneous fields where you have very shallow soil profiles mixed with deeper soil profiles. If we are managing to optimize the fertilization, the crop protection measures, and the irrigation on these land to exactly what the plant needs, then we minimize the agricultural emissions. Or we minimize as well the waste of water, because water is a limiting factor to many agricultural areas. And I think this is the very important contribution of precision farming to sustainability, to make it measurable what you really need per square meter and to avoid the waste of resources.
Thank you very much for that. Actually, the slide is quite telling of what is needed and where. Nemo, I think just announce the results for the last question, and I think that will be it for you for today.
Yes. So the correct answer is Ukraine. I think most people knew that. People were sort of two minds between US and Ukraine. But yes, I hope you see the answers there in the corner. Thank you.
So I have two more questions left. One for Andreas, actually three. Two for Inbal and one for Andreas. For Inbal, areas where remote sensing together with field data for precision farming could offer great value is linked to sustainability. Which are the most recent advancements in the use of remote sensing to improve monitoring and calculation of the greenhouse emissions at a field level? And how we can use it to help farmers better understand how to improve the yield or optimize irrigation. I think we talked about this a little bit, but perhaps maybe you can elaborate.
Sure, yeah, and again, if I could have, I think just one or two slides there. I think we've seen a huge increase in the interest of the use of satellite data, both to inform decisions around sustainable and regenerative agriculture, as well as to monitor. And we've seen that trend both on the research side as well as on the private sector and many startups in that area as well. And I think while satellite data cannot today provide you with a measurement from the field scale directly of emissions, what it can do is provide a large range of information that is very relevant for a lot of the different systems and models that are providing those estimates. And so what they can provide, for example, is measurements of crop biomass as the season is progressing, measurements of crop residue or tillage practices, different measurements of when a crop was planted, harvested, emerged in different parts of the growing season, presence of cover crops, different buffering practices, etc. All of these are really important pieces of information that are very important then for monitoring, for example, carbon and exchange. And so we're seeing a big uptake in trying to advance these models, and we have starting collaborations from NASA Harvest with various companies now who are trying to look at this and trying to at least automate the input of these types of informations that are going into those models. And I think there's a lot of promise there in terms of being able to increase the use and the utility of satellite data for these kinds of measurements. And then, of course, and I think we've already heard a lot, but in terms of being able to optimize application, whether it's of irrigation or nitrogen management, and I think we've seen a lot of different examples already today, including from Andreas just now, in the satellite data being able to inform when and how much nitrogen, for example, should be applied, or similarly on the irrigation side. And again, we're exploring collaboration at the moment on irrigation prescriptions and satellite data. You know, how far can we push the satellite data available today, for example, for giving measurements of soil moisture within a variability within a field? And of course, that's then very important for irrigation and as well. The other area then is being able to then evaluate, and so being able to provide better information to farmers of why and what are the benefits of implementing sustainable practices. I think what satellite are increasingly able to do, and we're seeing the research being carried out, is being able to evaluate, for example, yield responses to various variable rates and timings of fertilization, for example, or quantities. And being able also to then start to give answers to the long-term benefits of sustainable practices. So if, for example, you've now moved to low till or no till, you might not see the benefit of that next year, but over 10 years, what are the benefits of that? And I think that's very important in order to be able to ensure adoption of sustainable practices, is really provide the evidence that of the various benefits that will be provided. So I think that's very important, because what satellite data can do is, rather than just field trials, if you can start to scale that up, you can look at large areas and large numbers of fields under different conditions and provide really valuable insights in that way. Again, I think the big challenge is getting, or one of the challenges at least, is having the field data to understand that and to drive those. And if you could go to the next slide, I'd just like to give one example on this topic. Sorry, one slide back. And so on the left, again, that's over the Corn Belt in the US. the top map is looking at tillage intensity, and the bottom is at yields at the field scale. And when you combine these, what you can look at through time, and this study looked at about 10 years of data through time, is what the impact is of utilizing conservation practices for tillage on yields in the Corn Belt. And overall, what the study found was carried out by our partners at Stanford University was that there was an average maize yield effect of about 0.36 tons per hectare. And so I think being able to look at this kind of information at such a large scale is really valuable, and there's still a huge need for advancing these capabilities and insights that satellite data can provide to increase the uptake and valuation of sustainable practices.
Good, thank you. Thank you for that. Andreas, there is a precision agriculture could play a much bigger role in promoting sustainable solutions. It enables data-driven decision-making and with high degree of granularity and assessment of environmental impact, and it could be one of the indicators where decisions are made. Is there a possibility to use Granular and AgStudio to provide substantial proof for carbon credits?
Yes. I think I have also a slide there. I think it should be the last one. I think this is a very important point, and it shows again the power of precision farming and GIS data and sensors, because we want not only to measure what's happening in the field, we also want to translate this into profit or into benefit. Mm-hmm. And the reduction of, or the sequestration or binding of CO2 is a clear benefit to all of us. And we in CORTEVA, so we are working on solutions to translate this into a monetary benefit for farmers. So if they are binding CO2 because they change cropping practices in a certain way that they bind more CO2 than they emit, then there should be a monetary benefit. So for that reason, we are using our digital platform, which is called Granular, to take the data from the farmers, so to quantify the CO2 binding, to quantify the CO2 balance, and link this farm with CO2 marketplaces. Like here, one example is Nori. This is a marketplace that we are collaborating with, to sell these carbon credits to other industries that need to compensate their carbon emissions. So I think this is a very nice example where farmers can make money because they provide an environmental benefit to society. And this is a technology which wouldn't be possible, I think, without geographic information systems or modeling or quantification tools that are linked to precision farming. So this is one area where I think farmers can really benefit, and which is needed and needs to be expanded, because agriculture is playing a big role in binding CO2. Agricultural crops are binding CO2, and we need to make sure that our cropping practices are developing into a way that we bind more, that we come to a carbon neutral farming, basically, in order to work against the climate change, which is also affecting farmers as well, as like everyone is. So this is, I think, one example, besides the nitrogen and the other aspects that I've mentioned already.
And it would also obviously improve the name of agriculture in the whole climate change debate, if that were to happen. Thank you for this. Thank you. And our last question of the panel is to Inbal, and it's a slightly broad question. Where would you see the future of remote sensing and precision farming, and what needs to happen for it to work really well?
Sure, great, thanks. And I think I have one last slide from my side as well. As I've already mentioned, and we're really in a new era for satellite data, particularly for agricultural monitoring. I think if you look at what our capabilities are today, even versus 5 years ago, it's very different, and that's for a few different factors. One are the new satellites that are either providing free data, for example, what was shown for the Sentinels at 10-meter resolution every 3 to 5 days, but also at the high resolution, fine resolution data has become much more affordable, and we have 3-meter resolution data every day. And then, as you saw, there's even down to 30-centimeter data. Of course, that's got to be tasked, but it's much more accessible than it ever was before. At the same time, we've seen really a computational revolution. And so we now have much broader supercomputing and cloud compute capabilities, and that means that we can use these data, so they're not just mass amounts of data, we can actually use them and compute them. And we've seen big advances as well in big data analytics and machine learning, all really important components for being able to, I think as was mentioned earlier, making sure that it's not enough to provide data, we really need to be able to translate that data into actionable information that's simple to understand, that can be used, and so we're these are really important components for being able to do that. On the other side, we're seeing billions of dollars being invested by the venture capital community into value-added companies and into services, and I think that's a really important part of being able to make sure that these data are going to be used. And we're seeing, therefore, also the recognition of the value of these kinds of data that they can provide, and really having a push or a pull, as you want to see it, for the applications developed, and so that it's not a bunch of research papers sitting out there about cool applications of satellite data, but it's really being translated into information that can be used for decisions. I think I've probably said this 100 times already today, but I think we do need to think about how do we creatively address this bottleneck of ground data. And that means we do need concerted efforts for field data campaigns. But I also think that there's a lot more we could be doing in public-private partnerships, where we're being creative about how do we find different mutually beneficial propositions for being able to do that. Again, I think we need to make sure that applications are driving the development of products, but actually, and not only products, but actually also that feedback coming back to the satellite agencies and to those who are launching the satellites, and making sure that the satellites that are going to be launched, that are being planned today, meet the needs of what the requirements are. We, of course, also, if you're providing all this information and data, you need to make sure that it can be utilized and uptake. So the accessibility both to the data, but also of the technologies themselves. And I think that's still a big gap. And again, that's been talked about today. And, how do you make sure that this is available also to medium and smaller holders of farmers? And then on the other side, making sure that we can develop the capacity and understanding of how to use this information in order to drive decisions.
It sounds like, in summary, on one hand, educating our farming community, small and large, but also making sure that the data can be interpreted in the right way and it assists decision making, and that will then drive the sustainability element and the resource efficiency of it all, and predictability of farming, because farming, as we all know, for many centuries has been depending on the weather, which by many counts, sometimes it resulted in a good harvest, sometimes in a bad harvest. All of this data would make it a little bit more predictable. Well, thank you very much for that. I think we've been at it for an hour and 50 minutes. So Vasil, are there any questions that we could ask to our panel at this stage? Just being mindful that we are running out of time.
Yeah, thank you, Wojtek. If Ievgen is still with us, I think there is a good question for him, because he mentioned the infrastructural aspect of digital agriculture. And there is one question from Fortunato Costantino, how you are connecting smart farming, digital agriculture, precision agriculture, or whatever you wish to call it, to smart contracts and digital ledger technology to increase savings, security, transparency, intermediaries removal, and speed of execution. Evgeny, yes?
Yes, the main idea is that then we make our production plan, we put everything in one box, and also the export contracts and the logistic chain. And we not only understand the right technology for the field, but also the best logistic chain from the field to the customer. And it's bring for us the next advantage, because we know the plan in the beginning, and it's consists also with the logistics.
Thank you, Evgeny. I think we can ask another question. It is more general, and I think it's to all of the speakers who would like to answer. Could you comment on the role weather data and weather forecast play in precision farming technologies?
I think maybe I can take it. I think weather data forecasting tools are extremely important when you look at agriculture. We just had in the polling question the additional land that we need if we use technology from the 1990s. A large explanation for the increase of production is because we have now much more adapted seed varieties for different weather conditions, soil conditions. So we need to know exactly the weather, how the weather changes as well, how the climate changes, in order to adapt our technology to these new conditions. And from a crop protection point of view, weather is absolutely essential to know how the weather develops, because it is not only the location where you apply against a certain disease or pest, it's also the time when you should apply. So the timing of specific crop protection measures is essential for good efficacy, and here forecasting tools are very good. So they are very good already now, but I think we should not stop to the development here, and link this also with disease progression models and pest progression models, because pests are migrating, they are not static, and we need to know when the pest infestation is coming in order to prepare the orchards or the fields for that. So very important question.
Thank you, Andreas. There is one general question, I think, to us. It's about whether the presentations will be available for the participants. Yes, if all the panelists agree, we will definitely make them available to the participants of this webinar, and we will also share the link of the video that was mentioned by Ievgen on the technology and the open agriculture that is implemented by KERNEL. One maybe last question before I pass it back to Wojtek for closing remarks is about policies. What policies, state support measures could support precision agriculture, in your opinion? For example, subsidies for equipment, R&D, investment, etc. Maybe I think Dmitry could start, and if other participants do have something to add, please.
Thanks, Vasil, for passing such an easy question my way. Of course, I think we need to look at the variety of tools, because there is experience with agricultural policies that as soon as someone starts subsidizing something, the benefit translates not to the farmer, but to the producer or the supplier of the technology. It has happened, with agricultural machinery. You start subsidizing it, machinery prices go up. It happens with fertilizers. You start subsidizing fertilizers, and then you suddenly find that chemical plants become the recipients of these subsidies. So I think here we really need to talk about smart subsidies and really look at the main reasons holding up the technology transfer. It is a profitable technology by definition, so we really need to look at the public goods that the technology delivers and see if we can subsidize these. For instance, a lot has been said about lack of knowledge and lack of experience stuff. I think this is clearly the area where the government can provide a non-distorting type of support where markets will not be distorted. It's about reprogramming, reorienting higher agricultural education in Ukraine to provide that type of personnel for farmers. I'm sure that Mr. Osypov can talk a lot about the quality of human resources in Ukraine and where they would like to see improvements. Of course, targeted assistance to specific farmer groups. I think it is also essential. Big companies can pull it out by themselves. Smaller companies will probably find it more difficult. So speaking of SMEs, small farmers, speaking of other crops that are not maybe as widely grown as cereals, I think that can also have a differentiated approach in policies where some technologies or some costs of the technologies can be subsidized either directly or through providers of services. Another non-cost distorting way policy would be to support certification services when it comes to reduction of emissions, because it may cost $3,000 to $5,000 for a relatively small farm to certify it. Andreas brought today the experience of granular company, and that's the cost farmers have to pay for the certification of the services before they can enter the carbon markets in the United States. So maybe that's another way the government can look into provide smart subsidies in a non-distorting way. Thanks, Vasily, for this question. I hope.
Thank you, Dmitry. I will then pass it by to Wojtek with a question from one of the participants. Starting from the concept of farming management using modern information and communication technology to increase the quality and the quantity of products, how this is translated in benefits and advantages on the financing side or supply chain financing. Wojtek, back to you.
Thank you. From a lending side, that will mean better predictability, and better predictability results in better risk assessment, and perhaps such a risk assessment that lowers the risk for the client. So more investment made in this area. That's in general banking terms. From the development of green banking terms, clients who adopt this kind of practices will be sought after clients much more than those who do not. Everybody is in search of the green borrowers, green farmers that they can finance, and that may also result in a much preferential financing terms for those companies who engage in such practices. So on a pure banking front, as I said, it will result in a lower risk because of the better predictability of return. And secondly, it will entice development banking or green banking to connect with such clients, and they will be sought after. I hope that answered these questions. It's 3 o'clock in London, so it's 2 hours into our session. I think it's time to wrap it up. So as my friends in America say, there you have it, folks. Precision agriculture is and will play an even more important role to ensure that we limit the agricultural risk, as we just discussed, and impact of the sector on the environment. More data and smart use of technology will help the sector to manage limited resources, preserve them, like our soil, for the future generations. It is not going to be the only solution, but it will result in a better use of resources. In addition to changing food habits, better logistics, and focus on waste minimization, it will be a part of the big answer. It will help us to deal with the impact of farming on climate change, but it will also impact the climate change impact on farming. So thank you very much to everybody for participation. I see that we still managed to have 60 participants who bravely stayed with us for over 2 hours. Great thanks to our panelists, their presentation, spending time talking to Vasily and us, and sharing your knowledge and experience. I think this has been greatly appreciated. And of course, my big thanks goes to Vasily and Nemo, who and few others in our agri team at EBRD, who supported this initiative and made it happen. And great thank you to everyone. Thank you very much.